Happy New Year, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the 13th Fleet After Action Report. I am Chris, your host. Tonight we have got a lot to talk about, so I'm not going to waste a lot of time with introductions or let you know what's going on. I'll do all that at the close of the show. Tonight we are going to be talking Super Star Destroyers, and I have got my friend Garrett on to help us discuss this big topic. And it's more than just a big ship. There's a lot of big strategy that goes behind that. How you doing?
I'm doing awesome, Chris. Happy New Year. Thanks for having me on.
Love having you on because you're always so insightful and gives us all the information that we really need to know. We do have the chat open, so if you've got a question, send it to me and I will get it in to Garrett as soon as we can. But we want to start off by looking at the different potentials for what you might be able to build a Star Destroyer around. And I want to start with a misconception that I had when I was putting this show together, and just before showtime had that misconception shot down here, and that is with the Executor class SSD. This is not going to work in any build because, well, you got to have an Admiral.
Yeah, it's part of the tournament rules. 400 points.
Yeah, so while the ship itself is under 400 points, when you add an Admiral, there is no Admiral that is going to be small enough that would actually be able to let you run this. On the other hand, the big boy that is probably most often used, if I am correct, would be the Assault prototype.
That's right. So on the 400 point competitive level, there's two that are legal. The Star Dreadnought Assault prototype is massively favored by most players. And then there's the Command prototype, which is 30 points cheaper than the Assault prototype. But you lose dice, and it's got a very different upgrade bar, which we'll talk about. Do you want me to just go into it?
Yeah, let's go ahead and let's start with Command because that's probably going to be a little bit easier to touch base on.
Yeah, sure thing. So I guess the first thing I want to say is the Super Star Destroyer is a huge base ship, and a huge base applies to a couple of upgrade cards where it'll say like doesn't allow it to work with certain cards like point defense ion cannons that says non-huge ship. So it's the only huge ship in the game, and there are some special rules around it. When it is deployed on the board, you have to deploy it to where the base is touching your edge of the mat. So it can't be pushed forward. And there's almost no case where you'll be able to get out of that, including objectives where you have to deploy on like a space station. Either way, you have to get as close to the edge as possible, if not possible. And then other parts of it is there used to be a rule. If you purchase one of these, it says in the rule book on it that you get a pass token each round with it. That no longer applies. So they did a pass token overhaul a couple years ago, and I think expansions that are still purchased still say that they get a pass token. So it works just like any other ship now. But anyways, let's go on to the Command prototype. It's 220 points, which is pretty awesome because now you have 180 points to build your fleet with. So the biggest thing about these huge ships is they're 22 hull points. So that's a lot of hull point. The downside of it is when you're getting attacked and your opponent can get half your health, like 11 face down cards or face up cards on you, they get half your points. So you don't have to defeat an SSD in a game to really win. You just have to get it down to half. So that's an important thing to remember when building. On all the SSDs, you can't have defensive retrofits. So you got to plan ahead of how you're going to regenerate your shields, make them pay for attacking you. And that's both of them. But the thing about the Command prototype is you can bring fleet commands, and fleet commands in Armada are pretty awesome. Specifically on this guy, intensify firepower and take evasive action. And so intensify firepower lets you change a die to a hit, and then take evasive action lets you add yaw values. The assault prototype does not include fleet commands, so you can't run it with those. But back to the Command. So on both these ships, the biggest thing is that front arc. And it's got a big dice pull either way. But the most critical thing is the SSD gets to attack 3 times. A normal ship in Armada attacks 2 times. But since you get to attack 3 times, it's really usually advisable that you bring gunnery teams. And we'll talk about the weapons teams you should bring on this ship. But essentially, you've got a command value 4, and that means you got to set 4 command dials down before the game starts in that first phase. It's got a huge squadron value, which you usually won't take advantage of, but we'll talk about a good way to use it. And then it's got 4 engineering, which is really powerful when you learn that every time your SSD reveals a command, you also get a matching command token immediately for free.
And that is specific to the SSDs. You don't have to take any commanders on that for that.
That is super useful. So, and it's got double flak, and then defenses, right? It's got 2 braces, 2 redirects, 2 contains, which are pretty critical in keeping it alive. Now, the other big thing about the SSD is it's a speed 2 ship, but it has no yaw values. So at any point that you want to turn this ship, you have to have either a navigation command, I think it's a nav officer, or that lets you spend tokens a turn, or you have to bring a commander like Gergerod, who allows you to take damage to do a double click at your first yaw point. And all of a sudden that turns an SSD from some big lumbering long, stick into the most outrageous turning thing you've ever seen. It'll be able to do a 90-degree turn with a command and Gergerod.
And that does
nothing you can do about it.
And unlike most ships, this does not turn from the front. This turns from the middle of the ship, correct?
That's right. So I don't know if we've got a picture of an SSD, but essentially it's 2 large bases that are connected with a big, long cardboard piece. And when you move it, it's like you're moving the back large ship. And so that'll change on how you think about how the ship's going to turn. But essentially, it can swing wildly and trap ships that think they're going to get, around it to its back. And all of a sudden, the SSD can turn from being straight to like this and block the whole fleet.
If you watch the last edition of Thursday Night Armada, you will see me going up against Nick and how that ship just literally bisects the board if you don't fly it right. Now, I got pretty aggressive with my flying and was able to avoid some ramming that might have kept me locked in place, but it still was very, very unfavorable to me and kept me flying in a way that he wanted me to fly. Yeah.
Now, SSDs for years, well, I guess they haven't been out that long, just I think 3 years, but 3 or 4 years. And they used to be very weak because right after they came out, the Onager came out, and it's the same thing that happened for years to every ship in the game. It was very weak to Onagers. It could just get absolutely, split apart by that super weapon. But ever since Onagers have been made much more expensive, they're not in tournament fleets as often, and SSDs are doing very well around the world at store championships and World Open qualifiers.
Now, we kind of discussed already how the turn issue could be problematic for the Star Destroyers. How do they fare against squadrons? Because usually a lot of people like to use those to pick down shields before they take their shots.
Right. So you either need to bring a small screen or you need to build your SSD. It has a lot of upgrade slots. And so you can build it to be a flak monster. But essentially, if you run up against a squadron that's like Sloan and a bunch of bombers, it's going to chew through the SSD pretty fast. So that is a weakness, which is kind of an in-universe weakness too, right? Weak to squadrons. So, but I'll talk about how to build it so it doesn't happen. But so why would you bring the command prototype? Well, it's 220 points, and you're going to bring the command prototype if you want to bring other ships along with it. Popular combinations are, a command and an interdictor, or a command and a gladiator, or a command and a Architens. And then you bring 2 more Gazantes, and all of a sudden you get 4 ships and 4 activations, which can really pad out how long the enemy takes, and you can sucker them in to get that SSD shot that you want. So at 220 points, that's 30 points in Armada is a massive amount of useful points, surprisingly, when you're trying to fit things together. Yeah. But the biggest thing is, on both these SSDs, you can bring 3 officers. And so let's start going through the officers here.
Okay.
and we'll talk about which ones to pick and why you pick them. So I think he's got 3 up.
Yeah, we've got Admiral Ozzel, Agent Callus, and Captain Nita.
Awesome. Oh my gosh. I actually back it up. We should talk about the 2 commanders that are really
Okay.
viable.
Yep. Give
I'm
me
sorry.
just a second. I'll get that image up here.
Yeah. So almost everybody runs Moff Jerjerrod, and that's because of his navigation ability to spend a shield or a damage on one side of the ship. You just take the rear, and you can turn 2 clicks at the first yacht point. So you don't need to do nav commands to jump around the board. So you can devote your commands to con fire or engineering. And typically it's engineering because you're getting shot because you're the biggest target. So Jerry's great. The other option is Piet. Now, Piet's okay. And usually, he's only really great if you bring him on SSD or you bring an interdictor because he's an exhaustible admiral. So his ability is, let's say you reveal a con fire command dial, but you also have an engineering token on your ship. You can spend that engineering token and you can exhaust Piet, and that lets you have a con fire dial and an engineering dial. So you just spend a token as a dial. And then an interdictor you could bring to refresh Piet to let him do that ability again on another ship. But at that point, if you're bringing Piet, just bring Thrawn, because then for like 10 points more, Thrawn gives you 3 extra commands 3 turns in a row. But essentially, it's Jerjerrod or bust. You can bring other admirals, but they just don't synergize as well.
Well, I mean, the movement is just absolutely obscene when you see it done. Yeah. And the fact that you can use shields to do it rather than hull, and your engineering value is so great that, you don't care.
Right. And, if you reveal an engineering command, you get the command and the tokens. So you get 6 points, right? It's wild. So, anyways, back to the officers. So I wrote them down alphabetically as they are with their full names. So Admiral Ozzel's like the first one. Admiral Ozzel is a one-trick pony. You bring Ozzel to make your ship go to make a movement 1 at the start of the first round, so that your SSD can take a shot before the game really starts. It's like a poor man's Cataclysm for an onager, but it also gets the SSD in the enemy's face. And then you can use Vader, officer, who's on a Gazanti, to choke out Ozzel to reroll some dice.
Yeah.
Second guy, Agent Callus. So this is going to fold in to how you build a flat gun SSD. So Agent Callus lets you add an extra die when you're shooting at unique squadrons, aces. So if you have Callus and you have quad laser turrets, that gives you counter on your ship. All of a sudden you can, counter back with 2 dice versus aces while they're shooting you. And then when it's your turn to shoot, you can use Callus to add extra dice when you're targeting their aces. And then the third one here is Nita. Nita replaces one of your contain tokens, which aren't typically as useful for you, because you have 2 of them, and it gives you an evade, which gives you, you can cancel die at long range, or reroll them at close at medium. So, and then Anita, again, gets choked out by Vader for rerolls. Not a high value officer on the SSD, but it can be used.
Yeah.
Because he's cheap, right? He's cheap. So, and then we've got the next 3. Eli Vanto, which if any of you have read the new Thrawn books, the first trilogy Zahn did in the Disney era, the first book's really good. Thrawn, highly recommend. Not Vanto's like the secondary main character, protagonist, but in Armada, he lets you get a command token of your choice after you resolve a command, which is exceptionally useful to keep the token generation machine going. So, because you're free token when you reveal a command, and Vanto gives you another token that you need, and you can use that to, on Ravager, which we'll talk about as a title, or banking it so that you can activate your fleet commands, like Intensify Firepower. And then we got Krennic. Krennic's another popular one. Director Krennic allows you basically to re-roll red dice when you're attacking at medium to long range. He doesn't work at close, so medium to long range. If you have a dial, you can roll 3 reds, re-roll 3 reds, and if you have a token, it allows you to re-roll 2 reds. So it basically just improves your re-rolls. And your SSD always has 3 dice shooting out the front and primary left and right hull zones. And then my absolute favorite is Emperor Palpatine Officer.
It's kind
For
of a
3
jerk
points.
move.
Oh yeah. So this thing is amazing, especially since you don't have a defensive retrofit. So when you attack ship with Palpatine, you have to spend a defense token, and that goes for when you're salvoing and when you're attacking it. And that goes for aces, and it goes for ships. So no matter what, if you're attacking a ship with Palpatine on it, you are spending a defense token.
It's just rude.
Not a, yeah. And all of a sudden, like, when you're attacking the SSD and you gotta attack it and it hasn't gone yet, you have to spend a defense token to even start the battle. So sometimes Palpatine makes it so it's not even worth it to shoot at the SSD because he's gonna get you. Because you're gonna lose one of those critical defense tokens you need probably, especially later on, like late in the game when you're trying to attack and you've got like all of your defense tokens are exhausted because he attacked you first, and that's the biggest thing. If the SSD goes first and you get attacked, you're going to spend defense tokens to not die, and then you're going to want to shoot back, but then you can't because you'll have to discard your defense token that you just spent to live. And then after Palpatine, we've got 3 more here that I really like. The first one is our new girl, reborn. I'll say old version got banned. Governor Price. This new ability is awesome. She's 7 points. Everyone hates her. I think she's well balanced because she's the same price as an intel officer. But essentially, what Price does is you can spend a shield dial off the whole zone you are attacking from to change a die to anything. A red to 2 hits, a blue to an accuracy, whatever you need in the moment. But she doesn't work if you don't have any shields left from the holes that you're shooting from. And then we have Reva. So Reva's cool if you especially combine her with something like local fire control where you put a salvo token on the SSD. So Reva allows you to, when you get declared the target and you get, I think, shields remaining or something like that, she allows you to refresh a defense token. So if you have a red salvo, you can refresh that salvo and then spend it again without losing it. Or when you critically need a brace and you don't want to get rid of a brace. And then the last one is an honorable mention, but I really like damage control officers because lately everybody around here has been running overload pulse, assault proton torpedoes, high ion HIEs. Can't remember the full name anymore. But anyways, it's anything that's a critical. That's not a normal crit. It's like a special card crit. And a damage control officer allows you to use your contain tokens to make that special crit go away.
I didn't realize that. Okay. I was misreading it.
Yeah. So she's expensive to take because she takes up your officer slot. But if you're in a local meta and everyone is just destroying your life with overload pulse or something, you can put that on there and you no longer have to worry about it.
I wouldn't know anything about using overload pulse.
Yeah. Anyways, so those are the officers. I really like to put Palpatine, Vantu, and Price. I think those are the 3 money makers, man. Palpatine, they can't attack you. Price makes your attacks way better, and Vanto gives you the token economy. But moving on to weapons teams. The weapons teams, I've got 4 options here that I like. So the first one, obviously, is gunnery teams. And this allows you to shoot twice out the front, which is your haymaker.
Yeah.
Right? And that goes for the command prototype and the assault prototype.
And our friends at Ion Radio have just let us know HIE equals heavy ion emplacements.
Yeah, heavy ion emplacements.
Thanks for joining the show, guys.
What else we got here? Okay, so gunner team, almost always take it. The good thing about the gunner team with the assault prototype is you're usually not doing any other shenanigans besides shooting. And then local fire control. I mentioned that before, combined with Reva. That lets you replace one of your tokens with a salvo token, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really big, heavy rear arc that you're firing with the salvo.
And you can make it even worse, right, by taking flat guns on the offensive retrofit. So then you can use your salvo token at medium to long range, which sucks. Because then the SSD is shooting back at you when you're shooting it, along with its 3 shots. And then you've got vet gunners. Not as low priority, lower, but it works. It gives you rerolls. And then, but the best one, on the command prototype, this is really good. It's boarding troopers, and so the command prototype has a squad value of 5. So even if you're attacking a Starhawk, you can exhaust all of its defense tokens, or get rid of them with boarding troopers. And so, and you with your SSD, if you bring like a backup ship, like a Raider, another really cheap one, you can use the Raider to do the overload pulse, exhaust the enemy's defense tokens, and then do boarding troopers from your Super Star Destroyer. So, and get rid of the tokens. Moving on though, the offensive. So I mentioned flat guns already. That's for the salvo. But it also makes it so that if you put quad laser turrets, which is another offensive retrofit, and this works on the assault prototype because you can put 2 offensive retrofits. So if you put quad laser turrets and flat guns, when you counter with a black dice, which is really good because black dice hit at like 75% or something like that, which is really good. So, and then honorable mention, point defense reroute, and basically that allows you to re-roll your crits. Typically, you don't want to waste your slot on this, but it is an option to make.
I mean, I guess if your local meta is really squad heavy, then you may want to look at that.
At the point, yeah. So if they're bringing not aces or something, you don't need to bring Callus. You can just bring this point defense reroute. But yeah, so flat guns, quad laser turrets, great. Moving on to ion cannon slots. Okay. So we've got the HIEs, like we mentioned, really good because that allows you to, if you get a blue crit, you can take a shield off the front and off the left and right, and both the adjacent hole zones. Okay. So you're causing 3 damage with that crit before you start applying additional damage. So it's 3 hits for 1 dice. Well, really 4 hits because you get the 3 damage from the crit, and then
plus the damage. Yeah.
Right. So that's really good. And then the most popular one is leading shots. And that's for rerolls. So if you don't have a reroll generating mechanic like Vader on a Gazanti choking out officers, this allows you to spend a blue die to reroll the dice you need to. It's really powerful.
And I think one of these days we're going to have to do a show just built around officers for Vader to choke out.
Oh yeah, there's lots of options. Yeah, or when they just run out of usefulness, your Admiral. What else we got here? And then I put down overload pulse. It's okay on the SSD, but really want that overload pulse on another ship.
Kind of a setup for the shot.
Yeah, it's but you can use them with Palpatine. It's a good combo, right? So you shoot their ship. Overload pulse doesn't work till after they spend their defense tokens, and it only exhausts them, so they all are red. But when they come back to shoot at you, they have to spend a discarded token because you got Palpatine, and it works every single time. And then we've got the turbo laser slots. So here we got some good options. Link turbo laser turrets, always a moneymaker. It allows you to reroll a red die, and when you're shooting every time, no limits to rerolling the red die per shot or whatever you're doing. Salvos, flacking, but it's also really good against really tough aces to kill, right? Because let's say you get the assault prototype, you get a red to blue dice, flak. So you decide you got to take out, I don't know, Shara Bay. You roll your red and blue, and then you get to add 2 more die of any color. So let's say you're shooting a Shara, you get the blue accuracy, perfect. You just add 2 blacks, and you're probably going to kill her, right?
People would think that rerolls were important in this game.
Oh, it's critical. But then the LTTs, right? It lets you reroll that red you rolled, and then add blacks or blues if you need an accuracy, right? Fish for it. So LTTs are amazing. Probably too good. Probably should be more expensive or something.
Yeah, but I still see your favorite is on here.
Oh, well, my favorite's XI7s.
Yep, and that is here.
Yeah, so XI7s Everyone loves to redirect, but if you have XI7s where shooting at somebody, they can only redirect a single damage with a redirect token. So you
I
better
was
hope they brought
watching.
ESTs so they don't waste it, or they have one of those MC30s with their title that lets them move around stuff,
Yeah,
admonition or something.
I was watching another video earlier today, and they were talking about how the XI7's effect kind of works as well as another accuracy, because now you can go ahead and you can accuracy their brace, and they're forced to
Right.
use the redirect, and they're only redirecting one. So,
Right, because some ships have two redirects, like ISDs. All of a
mhm.
sudden, two of those tokens are worthless in that moment. And then H9s, so H9 triple lasers are a modification. They're really good because they guarantee you're going to get an accuracy, which is important when you're shooting at flotillas or just shooting at ships in general. Because if you can roll a natural accuracy and add accuracies, especially you combine H9s with like Governor Price, get two accuracies, lock down two.
Now,
Uh, although
do the H9s work with flak as well? So, if you're shooting at an enemy ace.
yeah, if you have the dice to spend, but it won't work as well unless you need to like basically you have to spend a die to do it.
Yeah.
So you need to like 3 die to make it happen.
Okay. Just
If that
checking
makes
on
sense.
that. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, that does make perfect sense. I just
yeah,
wanted to be clear on that point.
it's possible, but it's usually better against flotillas and ships.
Yeah.
And then the last but not least, and I see this all the time, especially on the assault prototype, you can take 2 turbo laser slots.
Hmm.
So you bring quad battery turrets and LTTs and XI7s. And quad battery turrets work awesome in the SSD because it says when you're shooting at a ship that is moving faster than you, you can add a blue die to your attack. And long range, medium range, close range doesn't matter. Which is really cool because you're an SSD, and typically you're moving speed 1. And if somebody else is moving speed 1, they're probably going to get killed because they're next to you. Because you really want to maneuver around the SSD as much as possible. Because the
Right.
SSD's rear auxiliary side arcs are way less painful than the front. Especially on a command where it's only got 4 dice. But so QPTs are awesome. And then we've got titles. So the title everybody brings is Ravager. And that's because Ravager is overpowered, right? Basically, when you combine it with Vanto, even when you're giving yourself engineering commands, Vanto gives you your free token of choice, your Confire token. And then with the title Ravager, you can spend a Confire token to add another die to your pool. So now your front shot is all of a sudden 10 dice, or 11 dice with quad battery turrets, or 12 dice with Confire, quad battery turrets, and Ravager.
Yeah, that
And
can
you're going
that
to
can pretty
die
much
at hit point.
erase something. Yes.
Yeah. So, incredibly painful. The other really cool title is Eclipse. Eclipse is awesome because if they overlap you, because ships can ram each other in Armada,
Hmm.
if they ram you, you both take a face-up critical card, I believe. Or maybe that's a Starhawk title.
No, it's just the enemy ship suffers a face-up
On
damage
Eclipse, yeah,
card.
okay, it must be the Starhawk one that you
Yeah.
both have to take a face-up. So yeah, so if you take Eclipse and they overlap you, they take a face-up and you take a face-down, which could really suck for them. There's some bad crits out there. Projector misaligned. Um, it's my least favorite one. Let's see here. And then I think there's another title that's okay. I didn't list here. I believe, yeah, the Executor title. That allows you to stack command tokens on your ship. But
Okay.
honestly, if you are, because typically you're limited to uh, only as many as command values. So you can put 4
Right.
tokens on your ship. But the Executor title allows you, whatever, just keep stacking them. But if you are a responsible Armada player, you should have a plan for all your tokens. So they should be being generated and spent
Yeah.
in the round or the next round.
There should be an active token mill.
Right. They're the purpose for something. Um, and then I already talked about the fleet commands, so we don't need to do those. Intensify firepower and take evasive action, which help with shooting and moving.
Now we didn't. We've talked about it, but we haven't really looked at the assault prototype as the base without anything on there. So I want to
Yeah.
go ahead and call that up here and let folks take a quick look at that, just so you see how much firepower is really
Yeah.
really
So it's
being
got
generated there.
9 dice out the front, red and blues, and then it's got 6 dice out each primary side zone. And then the back also has 5 dice. This thing's a monster. So you can take it's 3 officers, a weapons team, 2 offensive retrofits, 2 ion cannon slots, and 2 turbo laser slots. So this thing can be built to just ruin your life.
Yeah, you can pimp out that ride.
It's 250 points base. At minimum, like 273 with Jared Gerard. And then typically people bring 2 Gazantes to do CommsNet to supply more command tokens and repair crews or naked or Hondo or Vader officer. So typically you want to bring something with it. Some people run their SSDs alone. Makes it a little bit more difficult activation wise.
I was going to ask about the activations on that. You know, are the Gazantes often also used to help pad the activations?
Yeah, for sure. And also, let's say you are first player as the SSD and you only have an SSD, you can't use pass tokens because of the way mechanic works. Because you can't, the first player's first activation can't be a pass token. So pass tokens only work with the SSD if you're by yourself, by being second player.
Okay.
So that you'll lose an advantage there if you're facing a bunch of, an MSU fleet. Let's see. What else is important?
Which I guess MSU fleets are a bit of a weakness for Super Star Destroyers.
They can be, especially. I mean, this goes for any game ever if they know what they're doing, right? If they get caught in the front arc at medium range of an SSD, any small ship in this game is dead.
Yeah, it's going to be a
Like,
race.
just I'm sorry. There's just no way. So you got to stay at long range at minimum. Kraken, right? Kraken TRC 90s at long range. You're gonna struggle getting enough damage through, but it'll at least make you live. Because it's obstructed shots at those ships. So, and then they got evade tokens. So
now,
you
what
can cancel
about
a couple of red.
Is it Riken that kind of has the zombie ship mode?
Yeah, Riken zombie ship. He's okay. He's okay versus this. But typically SSDs, you shouldn't be terrified of them. They're definitely more powerful than they used to be, but they can be beat. So once you overload their shields, the first thing the SSD player is going to do is move his shields because it's cheaper to move than generate. So he's going to move shields from the back to the front. And then once you chew through those shields, you're going to start stacking on damage. So if you need to bring a high damage output potential or a really efficient squadron ball that can start chewing through it.
One question that I do have, though, is completely escaping me now. I guess I'll come back to the question that I had because it's gone.
Yeah, maybe all three. So the other thing I want to talk about was, okay, I have an SSD fleet. Do I want to go first or second? Almost typically, always, you want to build a bid in, like 10 points, 12 points, something like that. So you can be second player, and you bring just the worst objectives for them to deal with. And the 3 popular ones are obviously contested outpost, because you're a 4-command ship, so you're going to deploy immediately on the contested outpost and just start farming points, and they got to come to you.
That reminds me of what I wanted to ask you about, because you do have to stack those 4 commands. You have to know what you're leading into. How often are you going into engineering commands on that stack?
Oh, almost immediately, right? If you are going to take damage, you have Jared Gerard for navigation, okay? And you have Ravager and Vanto for Confire. And you're not squadroning, because you probably won't bring squadrons. So you just engineer the whole time. You're constantly being able to move. You're constantly able to shoot. and Vanto allows you to do all your shenanigans. Okay.
So this kind of goes against the normal theory of always be navigating.
Right. Now, if you don't have Jerry, you're gonna have to navigate,
Yeah.
right? Because you got to move around. Um, and then, so we talked about contested outpost. The other good one is surprise attack. Absolute nightmare for uh, the guy you're fighting is if they pick surprise attack. Not only do they got to deal with the raids, like that's the least of their problems because they got to put their fleet flagship on the station on the map. And so what the SSD player is going to do is just deploy their SSD essentially at close range at round one of your flagship. You're dead. So don't take surprise attack ever against an SSD. And then the third one is Doom Station. And it's basically contested outpost with a bunch of more rules. So you've got the gravity rift in the middle of the table, and this time, instead of the SSD sitting on the contested outpost, it puts it off to the side, and when it's time for all the obstacles, to get sucked into the gravity rift, anything that bounces or can't finish its move underneath the ship stays where it's at. So this SSD is just going to farm that Doom Station off to the side, and you got to come for it, or you're going to lose by 120 points minimum before they kill anything. And then two more really good ones are Asteroid Tactics and Infested Fields, and these are our Exogorth objectives, right? And both of them are really good because they can offer a lot of anti-squadron. So in Asteroid Tactics, you're moving the Exogorths, but you also, as an SSD player, a second player, when you land on an asteroid, you take no damage. So that makes moving really simple. And then in Infested Fields, you get to move the obstacles and the Exogorths that they are connected to. So again, more anti-squadron, and you get to move the obstacles in the way of the enemy fleet and out of the way of your giant SSD.
Yeah, I feel like asteroid tactics are awesome.
Oh, they really are. One of my favorite objectives. And the last one is advanced gunnery. If you take advanced gunnery against an assault prototype SSD, you're dead. Because they're going to shoot you twice with no penalties out the same front hull zone into your same hull zone of your ship. So they can just beam you to death. So, potentially, 10 dice at a time. So those are all really good. You always want to build a bid in, but you don't have to. Lots of playstyles here. Especially with the command prototype, you can build pretty interesting fleets. I wanted to run through two example fleets from well-performing SSD at events. The first one...
Okay, and if you have difficulty seeing these images here, because sometimes the print gets a little bit small, I do want to let you guys know that I'm going to post these up later on the Facebook page, so you guys can check it out there and see what you think of these builds.
Yeah, these are both good examples to build from too. The first one is Command prototype, and this one is from the Chicago area. If Ken's still listening, I stole this from our Command Stack podcast. So this guy won
Beef.
It's a fleet, like a proper fleet. He's got two Gazantes and he's got an Architans. But his SSD prototype is really cool. It's loaded with a couple things I didn't mention. So
it looked very defensive.
Yeah, so it's got Gergerod. It's got Ozzel to immediately move towards the enemy. It's got Palpatine and it's got Reva. Right, for the refreshing of defense tokens. And then he's got two other fleet commands. He got Take Evasive Action to move even more, and that applies to the rest of his ships too, like his Architans and his Gazantes. And then he's got Darth Vader Boarding Team. And so that's a little bit different than Boarding Troopers because Darth Vader Boarding Team allows you to just nuke an upgrade card off another ship. So you can just take away their Spat Tees or take away their electronic countermeasures, whatever is annoying to you, right?
Thermal shielding.
Anything but a commander, I believe. Yeah, thermal shields, yeah. And then he's got leading shots for the rerolls, and then LTTs, and then he's got Eclipse. So he's going to position his SSD so that you have to ram him, because it's just gravy for him. And then he's got three support ships. He's got Repair Crews, on a Gazanti, which allows him to remove damaged cards off his SSD. And he's got CommsNet because he needs the tokens for his fleet commands to activate. And then he has an Architens with Captain Nita and Turbolaser reroute circuits. And so that's even more firepower. So the SSD is going to shoot you, and then he's probably going to get 5 red dice with a guaranteed double out of this Architens. And that's 4 activations, which is really good for an SSD fleet.
Yeah.
For timing.
And I mean, Architens are just so nice anyway.
Right. They're an exceptional ship. I think they're in stock right now.
Really?
On FSG's website, if everyone's curious. They sell fast, so you gotta move.
Yeah.
And then, but the interesting thing about his fleet is he didn't care if he went first or second. He had a 2-point bid. He was ready to brawl first player or second player, but he could afford to because he had 4 ships to activate.
Right.
So that's a command prototype. And a second fleet was from the Spain World Open Qualifiers. And you can look up all those lists from there. I believe the website's called Longshanks, is the European one. And I believe he got 3rd or 4th with this, but it's an assault prototype variation. And so he brought a squadron screen of 2 TIE interceptors of Sienna Ree and Tel Treveri. He's in a jump master. So this is Sienna and Tel Treveri, both really difficult squadrons to kill. Because Tel's got his mechanic where he discards tokens and a scatter to get health back. And then Sienna is obstructed when you shoot at her, and she's got counter. So that's really, what's it called? Point economy efficient.
Yeah.
And then he has a Gazanti with Darth Vader, who chokes out officers and CommsNet for tokens. And then he's just got a built SSD here. He's got Gergerod on it, obviously, for turning. He's got Governor Price, gonna get that double or that accuracy. He's got Krennic, gonna get all those rerolls. He's got the Defense Liaison. I almost got to look this one up to remember what the text says exactly. Oh yeah. So before you reveal a command, you can spend a command token to change it to a nav or engineering. So if he needs to, he can do adjustments. He can also easily choke that guy out with Vader if he becomes not useful anymore.
And then you've got Gunnery Chief there that is going to let you fix dice.
Right. So Gunner Chief Fenarian is a finicky weapons team to use. So she allows you basically start the game with a die on her, and then you can swap out die on the board for a better die and bank it on her for a later shot. Like you can store a double or a critical on her, and if you roll a blank one round but you really need a double, you can swap it out with her and put a blank on her to do it, and then load her up again. And then he's got leading shots for rerolls, HIEs, which is that ion cannon that takes out the shields. And then he's got quad laser cannons for the counter defense squadrons. And then LTTs, more anti-squadron rerolls. And then Ravager, of course, for the extra die. And he had a 7-point bid. And I'm not really sure what his obstacles were. His objectives were probably one of the 5, or advanced gunnery that we mentioned.
Yeah.
So essentially, few ships, big damage off the SSD, or you try and build something clever around the command prototypes. But yeah, hope that was a lot of information we regurgitated out there. So
yeah, and I know you follow the lists a bit more than I do. I just have not had the time to really look and see what all's being played. So having said that, if you're going to a Worlds qualifier tournament, even a small one, do you think you can expect to see one of these?
Yeah, everyone I've been at has had 2 minimum. And I don't expect that to stop. So they're extremely popular ships, and they're much more viable than they used to be.
Yeah.
So you're going to continue to see them. Are they as good at like Adepticon Worlds? No, but that's only because everyone playing at Worlds is very adept at dealing with a Super Star Destroyer. Are they still good? Absolutely. Everyone there is good. So, it just depends on who makes the first mistake. Right?
I feel like for newer players, there are a lot of pitfalls that would go into playing this. I mean, you would think that you're sitting down at this table and you've got this points fortress that can throw out a lot of dice, but it might make you feel invincible, and therefore you fall into certain traps.
Right. So again, it can quickly lose 11 hull points. Like, that's only an ISD once they get your shields down. So I think the biggest thing with new players is they build it wrong, or they build it right, but don't know how to execute the timing of things, which is a big deal. So like when to spend your, because like if you have gunnery teams, you need to use Ravager on your first shot to spend the command token to activate gunnery teams, so you can take a second shot out the front or sides, wherever you're using gunnery teams at. Or when you're first starting to fly the SSD, it's got a wild movement chart with Jared Gerard, or even nav commands, and you don't know where your ship's going to land. And you know, one of my best tactics against SSDs is when we place obstacles out, is I try and put them in places to make sure that wherever this SSD turns, they're gonna land on an asteroid, and I want to get it stuck. I want to get it stuck there so that it keeps landing on an asteroid and pulling just the worst criticals.
Yeah.
So driving it's hard, flying it's hard, timing is hard, target decision, deployment, just like any regular fleet, right? Picking whether you're going to put this SSD in the middle of the board or on one of the sides.
And I mean,
is a big deal.
you may be able to shoot out of three hull zones, but on the other hand, if you don't have shots, then you're not getting those shots.
Right. So if you don't have gunnery teams and you've only got a front shot, you've only got a front shot. That's it. There's no more additional side shots for you because you're not an arc. So that's a difficult thing to think about, like where it's going to land and where the enemy's going to land, so you can shoot at them. Because on the cardboard of the SSD, you've got the typical, arc out the front, like an ISD.
Yeah.
But then in the middle of it, where it goes from the primary to the auxiliary hull zones, it's a straight line. And so if a player is clever enough to where they land their little ship, they can make it so they're only in one side arc, which makes it a lot more survivable. What else?
It takes some work to do it, but it can be done.
Right. But and then if somebody attacks you with a high damage output too, like somebody comes in here with, Patriot's Fist and gets off a bunch of B2 rocket troopers on you, and all of a sudden is throwing, 10 or 11 dice at you, you're also gonna have a lot of problems overcoming that damage.
Do you think with the new points values and everything that the SSD will have trouble with onager builds?
Well, there's not as many onager builds.
Right? Granted.
But if you still run into an onager, yeah, it's still going to be rough if they know what they're doing. Now, the thing about as onagers got so much of a point increase that all the shenanigans that made onagers just the menace to society, being able to bring 85 points of the best Imperial aces, plus your 2 Gazantes, plus 2 onagers, plus all the upgrades that made it bad, sensor teams, price. You only have to deal with now, either they got to take all the extras and the Imperial aces, or they got to drop the aces and bring just the ships. And once it's just the ships, or, one of these components, when you're not having to deal with 2 of the most damaging things in the game, you can overcome it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's really good players out there, right? Who are going to bring a Kuat or, an IC-2 and an Admiral Star Destroyer and eat your lunch, especially if you don't navigate in the right way to successfully, take your shots. That's why a lot of people will bring a lot of TIE fighters with their SSD, because they're cheap. So if you bring 4 or 6 TIE fighters, that gives you some breathing room when deploying your ship.
Yeah.
But, there's no way you're going to overcome somebody with 10 squadrons and 4 ships.
That does lead to one more interesting question I want to throw out before we finish up here. With the squadrons, you typically will place them within set distance of the ship, but with the SSD poking out into half of the map, what are the rules on that?
So you have to follow the rules still. They still apply. So essentially, what you got to do, and this is easier when you have segmented rulers, but so you have the your player deployment zone is 5 from the edges, 3 from the side. Okay?
Right.
You can put a ship at 3, but then you can deploy squadrons within distance 2 of your ship. So you just have to imagine a line at distance 3, and then deploy your squadrons within 2 of that line at the player's edge, the distance 3, but then also be within 2 from the SSD. So you're basically, it creates a box of 2 out from this distance 3, and then 2 away from the SSD's base.
Okay.
You can't like put them in front of the SSD
Right.
on the other side of the board.
And I figured that. I just wanted to make sure that everybody else knew how that worked there.
Yeah, there's ways to get around it, like fighter ambush, I think, or something.
Yeah. So we've got some tournaments coming up. What do you know of that is on the horizon?
Well, we got January 13th. We've got the Misos, and that will be
In Louisville,
in
Kentucky.
Louisville, Kentucky. And then we've got January 20th. We've got another Indianapolis at Sinclair Games. And then we've got ours on January 28th, which I should have signups ready for, I'm hoping, Friday morning.
All right.
After I talk to the store owner one more time. And that's a Sunday in Lexington, Kentucky at Chaotic Games and Coffee.
And I do know that we have been without Thursday Night Armada for a few weeks now. Things just did not pan out with the schedule to let us have that, but I can promise you that this Thursday night we are going to have Thursday Night Armada, so you can tune in on Twitch or catch the replay on our YouTube channel.
Yes, we'll be back. Bring my boarding troopers vinegar. Let's go.
Yeah, I think I will put you on the stream.
Let's do it.
Don't know who I'm going to put you up against. It's not going to be me. I don't want to see that.
Oh, I don't know. Hopefully not. Nick's Super Star Destroyer. Thing's a pain to play against.
No, we'll probably let you play against Ruben.
Oh, man.
Because people like seeing you play against Ruben.
Oh, yeah. We have a years-long rivalry.
Well, I want to thank you again for being on the New Year's show, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. We will definitely have you back again soon.
All right. Happy New Year, everybody. Bye.
So with that, I am going to go ahead and tell you what we've got coming up for the rest of the week. Once I get this call disconnected here. Sorry about that. So we do have Tuesday night X-Wing coming up tomorrow night. Hopefully we'll have a good matchup for you. We'll be back at Chaotic Good, so you'll probably hear a lot more background noise than what you did the last time, although I noticed that the background noise on the last video was kind of loud. Sorry, we're going to try to get some clarification on that, try to get that cleaned up some if I can. But aside from that, we also do have Thursday Night Armada coming up. And next week, we are going to be going back to focus on some X-Wing. We are going to be talking about how the scenarios play out as far as scoring points. So we'll have some of the usual suspects in. We'll have Dexter, we'll have Chris, we'll have Ethan, hopefully. So be sure to tune in for that next week, 9 o'clock. Again, tomorrow night, around 6:30, we'll start the X-Wing stream. And then Thursday night at 6:30, we will have the Armada stream. We did mention tournaments that are coming up. On the 28th, I will definitely be streaming that event, but I may try to get in at Miso's and stream that as well. See what happens for all you Armada fans. If there are any suggestions that you have as far as improving the stream, by all means, send it my way. I'm actually considering starting the Patreon just so that we can start getting the equipment to make for a better setup for everybody. But so far, things have been going well, and I want to thank you guys for watching and sticking with the channel. With that, I am going to say good night to you guys, and I hope you have an amazing 2024.